Welcome to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. What's your train wreck? Everyone has one. The question is, are you just visiting or are you going to live there? I'm Mary Fran Bontempo. Join me and let's learn how to come through those train wrecks, not broken, but brilliant. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. I have a very interesting guest today. Patrick Engasser began his professional career in the insurance industry, became a top producer, and Patrick has been blind since birth, but he inspires audiences by sharing how he overcame adversity and how others can achieve success despite their own challenges. He's delivered hundreds of presentations and trainings nationwide to corporations, leadership groups, and youth organizations. Super important today. And as a coach, Patrick helps top performers overcome obstacles and reach their goals faster and with less effort. I like both of those things. He is also the author of If I Can Do It, You Can Do It, Inspiration for Eliminating Excuses, Overcoming Challenges, and Succeeding in Business and Life. Patrick, thanks for joining me today.
Mary Fran, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm delighted to have you. And so I want to get started with this because I have a friend who, in fact, is a friend that I started Brilliantly Resilient with, and she has two sons who were also born blind.
Really?
So I've had experience through them with some of the things, just, understanding a little bit more about what you've experienced.
Hmm.
But here's the thing that I find so fascinating. You were born blind, as were her two boys.
Hmm.
And so, to the rest of us, I will say that you from birth experienced challenges, but I wonder if you saw it that way because you didn't know that there was any other way to be. So, was there a point at which you went, huh, like I'm different, other people experience the world differently? Like, did that ever happen, or did you just keep figuring it out and eventually as an adult went, oh, I could teach people some of these skills?
That's a great question. It's a different angle that I don't always get to talk about, but um, a little bit of both. I would say early on when you're young, you don't think about those things as kids. I mean, I have a 3-year-old, 3.5-year-old right now, and he doesn't really pay attention to those things. It's just this is my world, and I'm learning as I go.
Right.
But as you get older, once you get into school and you're around other kids, then you realize that there's some things that you do differently, and that you have to approach the world a little differently because other people, see in air quotes the world differently. So that I think is when it started. I went to public school, so I think once I got around probably 6, 7, that's when I started to really realize that hey, there's some differences here. But I will say this, one of the best assets I have as a coach is the fact that, as you just mentioned, I've had to find different creative solutions to everyday problems that most people don't think about at all. And I didn't probably give it a lot of thought at the time. I just you figure it out, and your parents help you to the extent that they can. But most people learn how to tie their shoes, cut their food, brush their teeth, put the toothpaste on the toothbrush, all that by being able to watch somebody else do it. Like, here's how we do that. And then you
Right.
do it some by figuring out, but a lot of that is visual. And for me, that was obviously a sense that I didn't have. So for that reason, I've had to find creative ways to do things differently. And that helps me a lot to this day. As probably one of my greatest assets as a coach is I think outside the box and look for different solutions almost without really giving it a lot of thought. It's just something that naturally is built in you know, over 30 years of doing this over and over in everyday life, starting at, as you mentioned, at probably 2, 3 years old when you're old enough to make those have those thoughts and actually have to start figuring out how do I pour the juice in the cup without having it spill over? Like what other ways can we figure this out without being able to see it? So it's things that I didn't think a lot about at the time, but looking back on it, it's probably one of my biggest superpowers.
And I really like how you talk about that. And I'm trying to say, here we go, from setbacks to superpower, turning your liabilities into leverage. And I love that you phrase this that way because we as adult sighted adults, we are often I don't know that we're tapped into our creative sides as much as we should be because we have, those advantages of things that we take for granted. And you don't recognize how much something like the gift of sight enters into your world. And there are certainly many, many other things that people have that are disadvantages, but consequently, it takes us a while as adults to figure that stuff out. And like when somebody says, "Oh, you have to think out of the box," well, I kind of like the box.
Don't we all,
Like,
right?
why do I have to leave the box? And
Mhm.
it's not always easy. So when you talk to other people, how do you get them to recognize that the box has almost become too safe a space
Mhm.
and you have to go out of the box?
Right? Seeing the comfort zone as, it's okay to be comfortable in certain areas. We don't obviously want to be living in constant turmoil. But at the same time, the comfort zone is, that box, as you called it, is I would refer to as the comfort zone. It,
Hmm.
it's it really kind of creates complacency if it's a place where we live all the time. I always say the comfort zone is the most expensive place you'll ever live because it's it's going to keep you from being in your effective zone and doing the things that you're meant to do, right? Your purpose is not to sit in that comfort zone, but to step out and experience the world and find out where you can make an impact. And most of the time, you're not going to make an impact by just doing what's comfortable. You're going to have to do some hard things. It's one of the things that I'm a believer in affirmations. Obviously that we have to go deeper than that. We have to actually take action, but we can't just say, I am this, I am that. But my 3-year-old, one of the things that he says all the time now, because it's something I probably have drilled into his head maybe too strongly, is I do hard things.
Hmm.
Because I think as human beings, it's easy, as you just said, to say, well, I don't want to do hard things. Who wants to do that? They hurt. Sometimes when we do hard things, you know, we have experiences that we don't want to have. We called up that person to try and create a business relationship, or we walked up to that person, asked them out on a date, and they said no. That doesn't feel good. So why would I want to do that again? And your brain is designed to protect you from that negative experience because your brain doesn't know, whether it's protecting you from, at least on the primitive side, whether it's protecting you from a saber-toothed tiger that isn't crouched around the next corner, or if it's just protecting you from that bad feeling you had when you got up in front of the class and you stumbled over your words and somebody laughed at you. And it's like, well, that was
Right.
an experience you had when you're 5 years old. That doesn't mean that that's the way that it's going to be every time you speak. So a lot of it is recognizing the comfort zone for what it is. It's one of the things when someone goes to talk with Patrick.com, they set up a strategy session with me. One of the things they think we're going to work on right away is strategy and, tactics, whether that be on the sales side, the business side, or overcoming challenges and working on mindset. But usually where we start is not strategy or tactics or concepts. It's usually starting with where is our comfort zone? What are our goals? And then what challenges do we have to overcome to get there? And a lot of that is just getting people to understand that the comfort zone is not their friend.
And and of course, we think it is because it makes us happy. It makes us
Right.
happy to be there. But in its own way, it becomes this limiting place. And I think there is as you get older, I think there's a mental understanding of, get outside your comfort zone. We've all
Mhm.
heard that.
Yep.
But to put that into practice is not an easy thing. So do you try to identify? Well, let me ask the question differently. Are there certain traits that you see commonly in people that they have holding on to that comfort zone? And there's certain strategies that you use to help them move out of it? Because I'm clinging white knuckled to that baby. Like, you're not getting me out of there easily.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It reminds me of one of my coaching members when he first started working with me. Um, he just didn't want to make cold calls, and that was
Hmm.
something being in the insurance industry I had a lot of experience with. And he's like, "You're so good at it. it's just something that comes naturally. I'm like, if only that were true. That's not true, by the way. I'm a lot better at it than I used to be, and some people would say I'm very good at it, but that's because for 15 years I've made cold calls. I don't do it a lot anymore because most of what I do now is speaking and coaching. But I mean, even as a speaker, like I call event coordinators. I reach out to the VP of sales to talk about setting up doing sales trainings for their company. So it's not exactly the same, but I still do that to this day. But this person this coaching member of mine was basically saying that this is something that his name's Dan, and he was, basically saying, "Hey, this is just something you're good at," and that's not what I. It's certainly not the case. It's not what I find is true with most people. It's that you develop muscle memory and you become more resilient at doing something by doing it over and over. And sometimes it's just forcing yourself to do it in the beginning. I mean, it's kind of like going to the gym. If you haven't been to the gym in a long time, like,
Yeah.
man, the first time hurts the most, right? And because even if you feel decent after you did it, the next morning you wake up and you get out of bed and you're like, whoa, I forgot I even had muscles in that area of my body, right? I didn't even know those existed. And everything feels different. For me, I don't like leg day. So, if I put off leg day for a couple of weeks and then I get back to it, the first time I try and go up or down the stairs, I'm like, man. So yeah. So it's doing that the first time, realizing that you lived through it and that, nothing really crazy happened, even if someone quote unquote rejected you or said no, that really your life isn't any different. Before they said no, the answer was no. The answer is still no. The only thing that changes is if you get to somebody and they give you a positive answer and it's like, yes, now something positive happened out of that. So I think just getting people in the frame of mind of doing some of it is just doing the things that you don't want to do consistently over and over. And that's what top performers do. They force themselves to do some things enough that at some point you start to get desensitized to this being a really hard thing. It's still difficult at times, especially getting going. I would say the first call is the hardest. The first minute of speaking in front of a group, although I love it and I get really excited as a speaker, but the first minute is always the key point for me. Once we get in the first minute, the audience is engaged. I get them, yeah, shouting something out, or we get them laughing at a joke. Now I'm in the game. Like now it's on.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
a lot of times it's just getting started that's the hardest part. And once you get started, you realize that, hey, I've made 5 calls. Nobody's screamed to the top of their lungs at me. My life didn't end. I'm fine. And then you just keep doing it. And the more you do it, the more, I don't use the word comfortable, but the more resilient you become. And because you grow,
Hmm.
your brain starts to get a little bit more desensitized in a good way to that, what it saw before as a harmful thing.
So, in listening to you talking about things like desensitized and getting more used to it, there is very clearly an emotional component to all of this.
Hmm.
And I think that's the thing, as you said, in referencing the saber-toothed tiger thing with your brain trying to keep you safe. It's trying to keep us safe. I would probably put out there from an emotion, a negative emotion or a negative feeling. So, is there any part of you that tries to get people to see that those negative feelings aren't actually affecting your work or your results or anything unless you let them stop you? Like, I feel like there's a big emotional component here that if we can just kind of teach people to turn off a little bit or lower the flame on, it becomes a little bit easier to say, okay, I can get through this because that emotion is not going to have an effect on me unless I let it.
100%. We're not robots, and I'm grateful for that, right?
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is because we're not robots and we feel emotion, like it's great to feel love and empathy and all the things that we feel as human beings, right? It's one of the best parts about the human experience. The opposite side of that coin, though, is we also feel these negative emotions. And as you just said, they can all often alter our behavior if we allow that to happen. So one of the things I work on with people as a coach is really feeling those feelings. It's okay to listen to those emotions, but to not give them the power, as you just said, to stop you.
Mhm.
So, I have a client I worked with, have been working with for the last few years, and that's one of the things I've worked on with her was, she was having these emotions stop her from doing something that she really wanted to in terms of starting a business. And it wasn't that any of it was true, what she was
Mm.
telling herself. It was this story that kept playing in her head, which I find is often, it's not just her, often the case with many coaching members I start working with. Even if people who are highly successful and they start working with me and they've had a great deal of success, they still have either this imposter syndrome or some emotion that's telling them that this next step is scary. And I'm like, but you've
Mhm.
had 20 steps you've taken that have been hard and scary before, and you've done that. But we all have that one thing or those two things that sometimes are obstacles. And most of those obstacles, as you know, Mary Fran, are in our head.
Mhm.
And being resilient is really just stepping out and listening to those emotions. It's okay to say, "Hey, I hear what I hear that emotion, or I'm feeling that feeling," but doing it anyway, right? And part of that is having a goal and a why that's stronger
Mm.
than that emotion. So if you have something that's pulling you and you understand why you want to do what you want to do, what your purpose is, and why you want to head in that direction, and that pull is stronger than the emotion that wants to hold you in your comfort zone, that's when people will take that step out. So I focus a little bit on the emotion, but more so recognizing what it is, and that as you just said, a lot of times fear is, false event or false expectation appearing real, where
Mhm.
we have this expectation that something bad's going to happen. But, the acronym FEAR, false expectation appearing real, it's an expectation we have something bad might happen, but then in most cases that isn't even going to happen. Like, how often have you or any of your listeners, or anyone watching, you've had an experience where you really were convinced something bad was going to happen if you did X, Y, Z, and then for whatever reason you did it or you were forced to do it and you went out there and it didn't happen. Like, oh, if I go out on stage, I'm gonna trip over my words, I'm gonna mess this whole thing up. And then you go out and you get off stage and everyone's like, that was amazing. You did a great job. Wow, you were really confident up there. You're like, I didn't feel confident up there. So that's an experience, and it could be, you could give hundreds of examples of that, but we've all had that experience in our life. The fear wasn't real. It wasn't something that was guaranteed to happen. In many cases, it's a very low probability, but your brain's trying to protect you. So part of it is that I work with people on is how do we how do we feel that emotion, but stay focused on the bigger picture of where are we going? Because if that why is
Mhm.
you have a red hot why that's strong enough, it's going to pull you out of the comfort zone and at least give you the strength to take that first step. And usually the first step's the hardest. Usually once you take that first step, step two is a little bit easier, step three is a little bit easier. I
Mhm.
would say that it's one of the reasons I encourage my coaching members, do the hardest thing first in your day, right? Start your day on a positive note with something positive. Feed your brain something positive first thing in the morning with a positive morning routine, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes. Gratitude routine, meditation, prayer, whatever that is for you. And then the first thing should be what I call your domino strategy, right? The first thing should be the one domino that'll knock down as many of the other dominoes as possible,
Oh, I
right? The
like that.
hardest thing usually, right? The thing that's usually the ball carrier. I think Brian Tracy calls it your ball carrier move. So it's what is that thing that's usually the hardest that you want to get out of the way, but you also want to put off. It's kind of what you were just talking to, holding on to that comfort zone with both hands. So you
Mhm.
don't want you want to put that phone call off until 3 o'clock because it's the furthest away from you when you're at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. But in reality, what you should do is pick up the phone and make that phone call because one of two things is going to happen. Either it's going to go really well and the rest of your day is going to be set up beautifully because that happened. So the rest of your day is automatically a success or better. And you're feeling great about yourself by 8:30. Or it doesn't go well, which is what you were afraid of. And your hardest call of the day is over. And now the rest of the day should be easier. Now I understand sometimes we have a 3:30 appointment. That's going to be the hardest thing of the day. And there's nothing we can do about the fact that it's scheduled at 3:30. We can't tell them, hey, we need to do that at 8 o'clock. But if it's something you have calendar control over where you're able to schedule it earlier in the day and do it first thing, I would encourage you do it first thing because everything gets lighter after that gets taken care of.
Yeah, I'm hearing so many things that you're referencing that kind of relate back to this whole release the emotional burden somehow.
Mhm.
Like just recognize that whatever happens, it's not going to kill you.
Yep.
And it's makes more sense to deal with the tough stuff early on. And I do that all the time in the simplest of ways. When you're at home and you have to clean the house, do the bathrooms first. Like get them
Mhm.
done
Yeah.
because that's the kind of thing that weighs on you. And anything that adds additional mental weight is not your friend.
No, it's not. And the other thing keep in mind is for your audience that we often measure the pain of, hey, what if I do this and it doesn't go well? But there's also the opposite, which is, what if I don't do this? What are what are the ramifications or the results of that, right? We'll use the idea that everybody's an experience everybody's had or at least considered having, which is there's someone in this room I want to talk to, whether it's because I want to get to know them, potentially go out on a date with them, or I want to get to know them for professional purposes. And that can be, scary. I don't want to walk up to this person. They may reject me, not want to talk to me. I may ask this person out or, encourage them to ask me out, whatever. And that doesn't go well. But the flip side is there's a guarantee that nothing is going to happen if you don't go over and have that conversation,
Right.
right? So, and what does that look like? Will you regret that? Or what might you miss out on because you didn't go over and have that conversation? Of course, that if you go over, they could tell you no, but or reject you in some way. But a lot of times on the opposite side, we're thinking about what if I would like to do this because something positive might happen. We don't really take that all the way down the road as in our mind as far as we could that, hey, if I don't do this, it's a guarantee that positive thing won't happen. They could be hiding behind this conversation. So I think a lot of it is really measuring the outcomes on both sides and understanding that if you don't, that's one of the things as a coach that I help people understand that if we don't take this difficult step, what's our life going to look like in a year? Because most of the time, Mary Fran, what I'm talking to somebody about as a coach, they already know what that hard thing is, right?
Hmm.
They probably have been putting it off for a while. And if not, if they don't know, it doesn't take long for us to dig deep and find it. But then if they want to put it off, it's like, okay, well, if we put it off like we have been and continue to put it off, how is that going to affect us 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road? If we take it 5 years out and we really project what that's going to look like if we do it and it works out versus if we don't do it, then that's when a lot of times people go, oh yeah, I mean, I'm really not looking forward to doing this, but man, I don't want this to negatively affect my life the other way and that I didn't do it
Right.
and this could have been better. So I think that's part of the challenge too, is really getting the brain to look at it from that perspective.
So the other thing that I'm hearing here is that a big part of this is retraining your brain to release, maybe is the way to put it, the what ifs, and to recognize that these are the things that are actually not real. The what ifs are not real because they're questions. What if I do this? What if I do that?
Mhm.
And actually saying, you know what, it doesn't matter what if happens, it matters what happens. And in
Yep.
order for something to happen, you have to take action. And one of the things that I talk about in Brilliantly Resilient is taking imperfect action,
There you go.
because nothing that we do is going to be perfect one way or the other, but you have to do something in order for things to happen. So is that part of what you talk about, like recognizing that, hey, regardless of what you do, it's not always going to be perfect. That's a rare thing, but you do it anyway.
It's almost never going to be perfect the first time. I
Right.
mean, right? I mean, it's as you just said, imperfect action is the key of what you just said there. It's understanding that you're not going to be good in the beginning. I mean, I think of things that I'm really good at now. I mean, I remember my first few sales presentations. They were horrific. I mean, if someone says, "Hey, do you want to go back and watch them?" I would say, "No, thank you. I'm good." I would not want to go back and listen to how I sounded on my first sales call or my first sales presentation or my 10th for that matter. Right? So it's understanding that if you want to be good at something, you have to be willing to do it imperfectly. You have to be willing to mess it up to
Hmm.
learn how to be good at it. The first time I spoke on stage, like I was super nervous, but I also was excited and I enjoyed the experience, but I wasn't good. People were
Right.
nice to me and told me I was good, but from my standard now, I certainly wasn't anywhere near the top of my game or my potential. So it's exactly what you just said, learning that it's okay to mess things up. It's okay to make mistakes. As a matter of fact, it's essential. If we want to
Hmm.
grow, you're going to have to make mistakes along the way to learn from. It's ideal if it's even better if you can learn from other people's mistakes, but it's unavoidable that for you to not mess things up. And it's just giving yourself grace in those moments and understanding it's part of the process. I think it's one of the biggest things that holds people back. I've worked with a number of people who started out working with me as they were perfectionists, and they
Hmm.
still have a lot of that going on. Of course, that doesn't just disappear, but they're a lot better at it. And I tell them right out, that is going to keep you from a lot of success. I'm really proud of you and happy that you have a high standard. I don't want that to go away. But an impossible standard for something you're beginning is not healthy, as you just said. Perfection of this has to be perfect or I don't want to do it. Then you're not going to do anything new because you're not going to
Right.
be perfect at most of those things.
Right. So I want to kind of shift gears a little bit here and ask if, as you are working with people, because I talk a lot about transferable skills.
Mhm.
Okay, is there a way that you point out to people, look, you might not have this skill, but let's look at some things that you've done in the past, and
Mm.
what skills did you use in that you can transfer to this new situation that can help you build that, that expertise or that at least level of comfort at doing it. So are transferable skills, and I'm asking you this particularly because of your lack of sight. You've probably had to transfer skills your whole life from one thing to another. And I would imagine that that's in and of itself valuable and is something that you can pass on to other people.
Absolutely. And something that one of my favorite entrepreneur coaches, Dan Sullivan, always talks about is measuring from the gain rather than from the gap. And that's the idea of what you just said, looking back at things that you've done, or even this goal, a goal you're working on right now, the progress you've already made. Most of the time, we just look at what we don't have, right? And the
Hmm.
challenge with that is there's a lot more that we don't have than we do, right? There's a lot more skills that we don't have, right, than the ones that we do. So if we focus on that or focus on, hey, I don't have this skill yet, a lot of times we don't put in the yet. We're just like, I don't know how to do that. I don't have that skill. I'm not good at that. Those are the things we tell ourselves. As you just said, you look back in your the past part of your life, your history, and you can look at, if you're honest with yourselves, all of these other things that you've already accomplished. And perhaps moving toward this goal, unless you just started it today, you've probably already taken 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 steps toward that goal. So let's not just focus on the progress, but let's acknowledge it. And let's at least look in the rearview mirror and say, hey, look how far I've come, or look at all these other skills I've developed. That gives your brain confidence to then say, okay, we've learned other skills. I'll give you a quick example. One of my coaching members, his name is Brian, great guy. He's in the plumbing industry. He does plumbing sewer sales where he goes down and with the camera in the sewer and really looks at the situation from how can we fix this, right? So these are
Hmm.
higher ticket plumbing jobs. Now he's been in plumbing for years on the service side prior to being in sales, and he's like, I don't have the sales skills, and that's why he hired me. And I said, okay, but there's other skills and this is kind of what you're talking about, Mary Friend. There are other skills that you've developed and you're really good at. You're really good at being a plumber. Well, you didn't know how to do that when you started. You became a really good plumber by, getting certified and then, going to trainings and class and then also really learning on the job from mentors and then doing it hands-on and getting better at it and better at it. You weren't perfect at that in the beginning. And so it's okay that sales right now, you're a little messy. So how do we get you to go from where you are by taking your past experience, recognizing that it's not because you're not smart, it's not because you're incapable of being good in plumbing sales. You already have the knowledge of
Right.
of plumbing, so you can come to at it from the perspective of I already know what I'm looking at. I just need to learn the sales skills. So as someone who was, 22, 23% close rate when I first started working with him is now closing at over 45%. Is one of the top in the top 2% in his industry in terms of closing in 15 months. And that's not because I'm that great. It's because he was willing to implement and he was open to the idea of, okay, yeah, maybe I can learn this. And then it was just a matter of learning the skills. It took several months for that to happen, but he was willing to put in the work to learn those skills and to recognize that that was possible. And within 60 days, he was noticing a big difference. It didn't go from 23% to 45%, but he was
Right.
noticing now I'm closing in the high 20s. Now I'm getting some people to say yes who were before saying maybe let me think about it when they really did need his help. They just, and I told him, I said, because his biggest hang up, and I think this is for in sales and even for entrepreneurs, because we all sell if we're in business. One of the things that, and in life, we all sell. One of the things that holds a lot of people back is I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to sell someone
Hmm.
something they don't need. But I said, look, you already know you're down in the sewer with the camera. You already know they need this. You already know this
Right.
is going to be a bigger problem down the road. And here's the challenge. If you don't sell them, and I said, do you believe in your product? Yes. Are you a person of integrity? Which I already know who he was, or I would have taken him on as a client. Yes. So you want to do the right thing for them? Yes. Said, so here's the danger. If you don't sell them and move them to action for something they already need, somebody else is going to do it who probably doesn't have the same level of integrity or may not. And now they're actually getting a worse quality product or someone who doesn't care whether or not it gets fixed properly. So you're actually hurting not only yourself, you're hurting them by not doing this. And that shifted his mindset, and he was willing then to learn the skills to get over that hump. So a big part of it is, as you said, recognizing that this could be a transferable skill, or I've learned other skills in the past. I can use that same strategy to learn
Right.
this new skill and give myself some grace along the way. It's going to take a little time and effort, but it's possible.
And I think you touched on something else that's important to me and to this whole brilliantly resilient concept. When you mention things like, integrity and knowledge and using those things properly. To me, there's always a value system involved in your best work, regardless of what it may be.
Mhm.
So to take anything that you're about to approach, whether it's, completely something new or moving into another area of a field that you work in, to really first of all kind of deep seat your value system and say, okay, why am I doing this? Why do I want to do this? This goes back to what you said before about the goal and the why. When you recognize those parts of yourself as intrinsic to who you are, it really gives you a foundation to move forward, and then you can address the other skills and things because you're coming from a solid place. Does that resonate with you at all?
100% it does. Intention is huge. And sometimes it's
Hmm.
just taking a step back when you're like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this or if I'm at this level to do this next, take this next step, whatever it is. One of the other things that I focus on, other than the comfort zone and those emotions and why those emotions are coming up, those thoughts in your head, I like to call it the story, that false
Hmm.
story you're being replayed in your head. But beyond that is what you just said, taking a step back and recognizing what are my intentions? Because a lot of people don't stop and think, well, my intentions are good, even though they know deep down they are.
Right.
If you're coming from a good place, if you're not, hey, I'm going to sell this person something they don't need because it's good for me and I'm going to extract money from them. Well, we're not going to be a good fit to work together, number one. If that's your mindset. But number two, that needs to change if you're going to have the right kind of lasting success because you can fool some people some of the time, but you're not going to fool everybody all the time. And so that's something that you see people who don't have integrity a lot of times fall on their face at some point. This comes crashing down because they've been living, a false narrative or a lie. And in most cases, that's not the case. Most of the people that I come across that I meet, they have very good intentions and they might, to your point, not be thinking of it that way. So sometimes
Hmm.
it's just to stop and take a moment and examine where am I coming at this? How am I approaching this from the angle of good intentions or not? What are my intentions in terms of doing this? Am I looking to help people? Am I looking to make a difference? And then starting with that foundation, as you pointed out, can really make you feel better about what you're doing and also kind of help you to adjust and say, hey, what I'm doing and what I'm bringing to the marketplace is actually really positive.
Hmm.
It's something good. It's something people need. And a lot of times that's a big part of the shift that people need. Then we can, the skills are, I don't want to say the easy part, but I can teach just about anybody the skills to have the success. I mean, if you want to become if someone like me who can't see wants to become a professional race car driver, that's probably not going to happen. Okay, but so there are some real limitations out there in the world. There is reality. Okay,
Right.
but if it's a skill that can be learned, learning it's usually not the hard part. Usually getting past the mental blocks and
Hmm.
removing those blocks, removing those obstacles and those excuses, because a lot of times they're excuses masquerading as something else, or we believe that there's something true there, but really it's harsh to call it that, but really it's an excuse, right? So we eliminate those and then look at what are my intentions and then how can I build this skill set? What am I going to have to do? Who am I going to have to work with? What am I going to have to practice? What am I going to have to go out there and do? What first step out of my comfort zone am I going to have to take? Those skills can be built. That's the good news. The bad news is it's going to take some work.
But once you remove, and I think you really just put this so beautifully about once you remove those like kind of roadblocks to your mindset and recognize that whatever you're doing, hopefully, is grounded in something good, in good intentions, in being of service in some way. And when you're selling things, if it's a product, as you pointed out earlier, that someone needs, that's being of service. But if you can really ground and hook into that, I think it does make all of those other things easier. It does make it easier to say, all right, well, I need to learn this in order to be effective at doing something good and being of service or being of whatever. And it sort of takes, this is another thing we haven't really talked about, but I think it's there with a lot of people. It sort of takes that guilt away from the money aspect of selling. Like when you can look at it and say, this is, as you said about the plumbing example, this is something this person needs. People don't want to take other people's money for a selfish reason. So I think that's something that we have to overcome too. And if you ground it in that space, I think that removes a lot of that stress. Yeah?
100%. For me, my whole sales career changed and then eventually obviously became a business and sales, a leadership coach and speaker later on. But when I started out in insurance sales, my whole career changed. I hired a business and sales coach at the end of my second year. I was in the 500s out of about 615 agents in the organization in terms of new business closed. 14 months later, I was the number one new account closer, right, in that organization. And you would say, well, how is that possible? Well, the biggest thing, you must have learned lots of different skills. I did learn some new skills for sure. I learned how to present better. I learned how to engage the audience better. I learned how to ask better questions, or I should say, just start asking questions. Because before that, I just used to babble at people and then be like, wow, they didn't buy. I don't know why that happened. Uh, Rather than uncovering their pain and things like that, and then helping them find a solution to that pain. But the biggest thing that changed for me was the mindset shift from number one, that my blindness was not a liability, that it was something I could see as leverage or as an asset. That when I went in from, I started by walking in the beginning. I walk in with a guide dog, and everyone's going to see a neon sign on my forehead that says blind salesperson approaching. That flipped after working with a coach, the right coach, to when I walk in, I'm walking in with a dog. I got an unfair advantage. Everyone's going to want to talk to me. And 8 out of 10 people love dogs. Like this is an easy one. And once I flip that mindset, things change. But the second one is something important that you just touched on. When it became about other people instead of about me making money. And it wasn't that I was like, oh my, I'm going to make a lot of money and that's the most important thing to me. It wasn't that. It was that you just said some guilt about I have to go in and get this sale because I need to pay my bills and, get out of debt and change my life for the better. But it was all about me. Yet I wanted to help people, but I just wasn't focused on that part. Once I shifted my mindset, because I had helped doing that, someone who told me I could and really focused on my intentions, I became other focused, focused on other people.
Mm.
Hey, I can help this person across the table from me. And when it became about them and all about them, the other stuff was still there. But when I was really allowed that part of my brain to just quiet down and be like, we're going to focus on that later. But right now I'm focused on how I can help this person. One, everything shifted for the person across the table. They could tell I was there to help them. I was before, but I just had a different approach. Now it was focused on other people. If you're focused on other people, and not focused on, as you just said, how do I get paid, or am I being greedy for wanting money? When you focus on other people and the solution that you can bring and how you can make an impact, it gets easier. You don't worry so much about rejection. You don't worry so much about doing uncomfortable things because you're not doing it for you anymore. You're doing it because this person behind this manager, who I might present to employee benefits, or the manager themselves, or the owner of the company, or the CEO, I have something that I can help them with. If I don't do it, they're not going to have that solution. So when you start focusing on other people, everything starts to shift and things just get easier because it's not about you anymore. And that takes the pressure off of your shoulders.
I love that. I love the way you phrased all of that, and it really speaks to me in so many ways. Patrick, this has been an amazing conversation. I really
Love
appreciate
it.
it.
Love
And I
it.
have to say, we barely touched on your book, but I am sure much of the wisdom that you just dispensed is included in that. I want to tell people the title of it again. If I can do it, you can do it. Inspiration for eliminating excuses, which we talked about, overcoming challenges and succeeding in business and in life. Patrick, tell everybody where they can learn more about you because I really want people to check out your wisdom and your work.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. So you get the book on Amazon. If I can do it, you can do it. Patrick Engasser, Engasser. Or you can get it on my website, patricengasser.com. If you're an event coordinator or a sales leader, VP of sales, anybody who has a sales team or is in a leadership position, I do leadership training and sales training. You can go find me at patricengasser.com, which I know Mary Fran will throw that in the notes, which I appreciate. And also, here's the last thing I'll leave everybody with. If you want something really simple that can make a huge difference in your life, if you have a goal and you haven't written it down, statistics say you are 42% more likely to hit that goal if you just take the simple step of writing it down. There's a way the brain wants to be spoken to. So
Hmm.
teaching the brain in a way it wants to be spoken to. So writing those goals down the right way is important. And you can get that for free with a free strategy session with me. Whether we end up working together or not, you'll leave this strategy session with a goal statement that's written out. Talkwithpatrick.com. You just go to talkwithpatrick.com. You have to have a goal. You can't come without a goal. That part I can't find for you. You need to know what you want, but I can help you write that goal down in a way that's going to speak to your brain, and you will leave with that goal statement written. Because if you write your goals down, the rest, I would say, gets easy, but it gets easier because your brain now knows what to focus on. So talkwithpatrick.com. Would love to hear from you and help you in any way that I can. PatrickEngasser.com for the speaking side, and you mentioned the book. So thank you so much. This has been awesome, and I hope that your audience got something out of it because I got a ton out of it.
I have no doubt that they will, as I did. So, everybody, please check out all those things. All of this stuff, all the links and everything will be in the show notes when this episode airs. And if you need a little bit more inspiration, head on over to brilliantlyresilient.net. You can sign up for our Brilliance Bit, of which Patrick will be a part when this episode airs. And we will see you next time on the next episode of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Now, before you go, remember this. Resilience isn't about bouncing back to who you were. It's about becoming who you're meant to be. If today's episode helped you reset, rise, or see your brilliance a little more clearly, I invite you to take the next step with me. Explore the Brilliantly Resilient resources, including the podcast, books, and the new Brilliantly Resilient mini course series, all designed to meet you exactly where you are. You can learn more and get started at brilliantlyresilient.net. Until next time, stay steady, stay curious, and keep moving forward, one resilient step at a time.